How you going? Try not to fall asleep during this one. This one's about budget and spending, need for a national weather modification research programme, B-1333202, the US Government Accountability Office, the GAO. It's a report basically seeking funding to create an office that oversees all of the national weather modification research programs carried out by different agencies. Don't talk about this one down the pub, you are going to sound so boring. Like, I'm going to sound boring, but down the pub it would be even worse. It's okay on YouTube or somewhere. So it's a report to the Congress, multi-agency, August 23rd 1974, that's stamped. So why the review was made. Weather modification research is part of an attempt to understand the atmosphere of the Earth and other planets. Through this research, which is primarily federally supported, it may be possible to alleviate drought, reduce destructive forces of hurricanes, suppress lightning and damaging hail, and dissipate fog. So as said, during fiscal year 1974, 7 federal departments and agencies, which were Agriculture, Commerce, Interior, Defence, Transportation, the National Science Foundation and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known to some people as NASA, conducted weather modification research. So that's who's who. Estimated cost for this research increased from about $3 million in fiscal year 1959 to about $17.4 million in fiscal year 1974. So it's gone up by $12 million in 15 years, almost $1 million a year. Is that? No homeless people in America then, if you can spend that on weather modification. Anyway, let's have a little look, shall we? See what else we've got highlighted. Findings and conclusions. Yeah. The Interdepartmental Committee for Atmospheric Sciences, part of the Federal Council for Science and Technology, is responsible for identifying opportunities for improving atmospheric science programs. It, however, has no authority to direct federal research programs. It's always a good one, isn't it, politically? Have someone to look at stuff, recommend stuff, but give them no authority to implement anything. That's going to work out, isn't it? Always. One noted piece of information to do with the Department of Agriculture. They plan to assess crop damage from hail and study the economic effects of hail suppression. The Foundation, however, had to subsequently fund the later study. Also, Agriculture could not coordinate and direct the experiment's electrical studies as planned. Always the electricity. Most of the agencies acknowledged administrative and management problems in weather modification research, but, except for Commerce, did not agree with GAO's recommendations for a national programme. So they preferred to keep it all a bit separate, keep it separated. The Office of Management and Budget believes some consolidation of weather modification research was desirable, and that proposed legislation to establish a Department of Energy and Natural Resources would accomplish the appropriate degree of consolidation. Early 1970s up till now, so let's say 50 years, why not? 50 years ago, this was the talk. So weather modification research is part of the atmospheric sciences, which is devoted to understand the composition and processes of the Earth and other planets' atmospheres. The federal government supports atmospheric research in 3 programme areas. Weather modification research is primarily part of the meteorology area and includes precipitation modification, fog and cloud modification, hail suppression, lightning modification, hurricane and severe storm modification, inadvertent modification. So the most interesting one there, of course, is the inadvertent modification, to monitor atmospheric constituents and study their modifying influences on the weather. So that's like accidental modification, and then to monitor that. Who knows? But inadvertent, you'll have a bit of a anything could happen modification. Yeah. Accidental. Science lacks the knowledge to answer many of the questions on weather modification. Yeah, but common sense answers them all, doesn't it? Skip the science, go straight to the common sense. Give you all the answers you need. So this isn't some conspiracy of maybe something that could be involved with something else, potentially could mean that your weather was modified in America in the early 70s, even though we know it's been done since the early 40s. But regardless, it's very difficult for people to claim conspiracy when we read the next bit. During fiscal year 1974, 7 of the 9 federal departments and agencies conducting atmospheric sciences research were involved in weather modification research. So, 7 federal departments in the USA were involved in weather modification research. So 50 years later, when your country's on fire or getting blown from one side of the state to another, or having snow where it's just not normal to have snow, consider that something's changed, something's being changed. You're told every day that it's factories in China, it's a forest in Indonesia, and yeah, it might be these things, but you know, on a more local level, your weather's been modified for the last 80, 90 years. Connect that to climate change, climate crisis, climate whatever, but just connect it. Okay? The review was directed primarily at obtaining information on federal weather modification research and identifying opportunities for improvements in the administration and the management of research programs. It included an examination of records and scientific reports, interviews with officials of the various coordinating committees and federal agencies including W.M.D and the former Office of Science and Technology, and interviews with recognised authorities outside the federal government, namely the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, Department of Commerce, Defence Advanced Research Projects Agency, Department of Defence. No, what's that? Oh, DARPA. Bureau of Reclamation, Department of the Interior, the NSF, National Science Foundation, Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Transportation. So, yeah, bit of information, 1974, coming from DARPA. My God, and we all thought it was a 21st century robot thing. Oh no, weather modification, 1970s, and before. To date, except for the establishment of several coordinating committees, subcommittees and advisory panels, none of which have the authority to take action to correct problems already identified, an effective overall national weather modification research programme has not been established. And to date, 2019, because that was as per 1974, to date there's pretty much still no kind of overseeing regulation. Zero Geoengineering website, they've been trying to get some through here and there in state senates, but yeah, the battle is ongoing. But at least we've got started now, haven't we? Hey, 80 years later, 90 years later. On the regularity of how often these people get together to have a little chat, Its members, scientists, administrators from the federal agencies involved, meet monthly, and they make the recommendations, etc. So these, these people are active. And if they were active in 1974, believe me, they're active in 2019. So again, the sort of black and white confirmation that this isn't just stupid blog stuff that people are talking about. This is real world. This has been going on a long time, and this has had an effect on our weather and in turn on our climate. The climate we expect to have, we don't have anymore. So federal legislation on weather modification activities. The spread of private weather modification activity in the United States in the late 1940s and early 1950s raised concern in the Congress about the usefulness and effectiveness of this new technology. So we went over a bit of that from the 1950s in the other video about California. But there it is, in the late 1940s. You can't get clearer than that. So whoever you are, whether you're one of these Extinction Rebellion people or the person just sitting home or in the middle of nowhere in your hut and doesn't have anything to do with the world, it's 1940s. People have been messing around with your weather. It's there. It's federally observed. The Congress was talking about this stuff. They created laws about it. The Congress, through Public Law 83256, approved August the 13th 1953, established an advisory committee on weather control. JFK was famous for talking about that. If you've never seen it, search it out. In following up on the report recommendations, the Congress enacted Public Law 85510, approved July the 11th 1958, which authorised and directed the National Science Foundation to initiate and support a programme of study, research and evaluation in the field of weather modification. So you've got public laws being made to kind of have a look at it and do a bit of it, but nothing to really kind of inform you about it as such. But anyway, let's not connect that to modern problems. Moving on. The Commission recommended that the Office of Science and Technology establish a special mechanism for the coordination of weather and climate modification programs and for recommending such steps as may be appropriate for effecting a unity of governmental policy in this field. So, once again, 1974, a special mechanism for the coordination of weather and climate modification programs. How many times do we sort of, the people that speak about this, how many times do they have to say it? Like, it's not a conspiracy, they're not mad, they're trying to get you to understand the same thing as when people try and talk to you about fracking or something. It's no different. It's a bloody technology that exists in the real world, and it's existed for 80 years.